Wait, remember Liberty's Kids? Well, we're going to celebrate America's 250th birthday the only way that you should be doing it. And that's by jumping into the nostalgia of Liberty's Kids. Liberty's Kids was an edutainment cartoon series on PBS that focused on a group of kids being at the center of the birth of the United States, specifically detailing the events of the American Revolution and the important figures during this time, all while trying to teach and entertain you. And today we celebrate this by eating hot dogs and wearing red, white, and blue Kiss the Cook aprons. For some reason. But since I am here spending the 4th of July not going out and instead watching Liberty's Kids, I figured we should do this together. Now, aside from my personal enjoyment of edutainment-based programming, I do think this show has a lot to offer and say that goes beyond what you may be expecting from it, allowing for some deeper understandings of what's happening in the build-up and construction of the United States. But that doesn't mean it's perfect and 100% accurately touching every topic or showing every historical figure in the way they actually were. So today, let's have a journey back to the early 2000s, where we would then take another journey back some more to see what happened in the tail end of the 1700s.
Does that sound fair to you?
I don't know what to think.
Originally titled Poor Richard's Almanac based on the at the time yearly published almanac of the same name that Benjamin Franklin would release throughout the mid-1700s, Liberty's Kids would have that play a major factor into the series. Announced in the year 2000, the series' premise was described as Poor Richard Waxes Historic, detailing the adventures of two fictional kids apprenticed to Ben Franklin in his print shop during the American Revolution. The time frame provides ample opportunity for adventure and conflict for the characters, and rather than glorifying the period, the series makes painstaking attempts to be as historically accurate as possible. Along with that description, the series also stated that Pulitzer Prize winner Stanford historian Jack Rakove would consult on the series. And this series, that would now be in development by Deke Entertainment and created by Kevin O'Donnell, would be heading to PBS for broadcast in the United States and would target a release date for September of 2002, with 40 planned half-an-hour episodes. Along the way, things changed in production, with the biggest thing being the title of the series. Opting to call it Liberty's Kids, which I do feel is not only a snappier title, but it made understanding what the premise of the show is about easier for a younger audience to have interest in. At the age I was when this show came out, I wouldn't really know who or what Poor Richard is, and the only time I ever heard the word almanac was in Back to the Future. Liberty's Kids, on the other hand, yeah, I get it. That's a strong name. Sorry, Poor Richard. These are the kids around at the time during the American Revolution. Either that, or this show's about someone named Liberty, and these are her kids. Hi, I'm Jordan Fringe, your solid C student and your favorite D-rank YouTuber. With the series premiering on PBS Network September 2nd, 2002, we would get introduced to our main two teen characters, Sarah and James, and their direct connection to everything we would explore. As they work for Benjamin Franklin, each with their own initial perspectives of the time, we see how these fictional characters interact with non-fictional historical figures in order to write and detail historic moments for Benjamin Franklin's Pennsylvania Gazette newspaper. Working with them as well are two other fictional characters, a younger kid named Henri, as well as Moses, who, while not technically being a kid to be under the title of Liberty's Kids, is a very important character for understanding a deeper look into the time period and being a great role model and supervisor to the kids.
The army will survive to fight another day.
What is interesting about the show is how it brings in all of the main cast of characters, as they each have their own stories that have brought them to where they are. For James, he's a character that is from the colonies, being left an orphan as a baby after his parents died in a fire that in turn was caused by a lightning strike because of Benjamin Franklin's lightning rod that he had invented, so that sucks. But at least Benjamin Franklin takes him in to work for him eventually, so that's a bonus, I think. I don't know, it kind of feels weird. Sorry I got your parents killed, want a job?
I'm a journalist.
Either way, he's a supporter of what the colonies are, and is for the cause of America becoming America. And through this, he has basically become a journalist for Ben Frank's newspaper. But that sounded like something a company would do for marketing around the time of 4th of July. Ben Frank's Red Hot Sauce. There you go, Frank. You can have that one for free. James is very much set in his ways and beliefs, choosing to write about the conflict between England and the colonies from the strict perspective of the colony side, which, hey, is fair for a kid growing up through this and being from the colonies, as we see all of this contrasting with the character of Sarah, a girl from England who comes to the colonies in hopes of being with her father, who is currently on the pursuit of expanding the colonies by heading west. She's not so much on the same side of things as James, as we see her at the start of the series being a loyalist to her country she's from, and butting heads with James over his Murica journalism, finding her place in working for the newspaper in order to offer other perspectives to all of the tensions building between England and the colonies. Plus the major differences of how unmannered James is versus the more prim and proper way Sarah carries herself is there, causing more back and forth moments between the two. Luckily, they really do grow quite a great friendship, allowing conversations and experiences to really understand themselves and the world around them. They are two people who come from complete opposite backgrounds and know two different ways of life. So with them coming together as teenagers, living through these important moments in history, we really get to see them grow up and become young adults, see how their ideals can change or how their outlook on everything going on expands. These are their formative years in their lives, and what will be major historical events are happening. They are experiencing all of these aspects of the Revolutionary War, from how information spreads, to the loss of life, to directly being on the battlefield. But of course, it's not just those two, as there's also Henri. He's a good bit younger than the others, and he has a bit of a tragic story as well for why he's here in the series. Him and his parents were on their way to America, seeking passage on a merchant ship, but aside from the labor they were all forced to do, an illness took half the lives on the ship, leaving Henri parentless, and then forced by the captain to be a cabin boy, and making him do whatever he says and just treating him awful. It wasn't until the ship made its way to the colonies where James and Moses ended up finding him while they were picking up stuff from the merchant, and thus deciding to help him escape and give him a home where they work. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty sad backstory. Jesus. At least he has something in common with James. Henri tags along and helps out with whatever's needed of the others, trying to find his place in this world. There is a big found family theme going on for him, and his relationships to the others in the main cast of characters here. Even more so to another person later on, Marquis de Lafayette, who was an actual French military officer that fought in the Continental Army against the British Army in the Revolutionary War. Was he in Assassin's Creed 3? I can't remember. What? Assassin's Creed games were how I learned history. You're gonna sit there and tell me that these games aren't 100% accurate? Right, and what are you gonna try and tell me next? That 9 plus 10 doesn't equal 21? Idiots. Then of course there is Moses, who works for Benjamin Franklin to help make the newspapers as well as look over the kids as they do their jobs both at the print shop and on the road for any travels they have for the most part. He's someone who was brought to America as a slave, and from him learning to read, learning a trade, and being hopeful of a better America, he ends up buying his freedom and leaving South Carolina, leading to him eventually being in Philadelphia to work for Ben Franklin. The series didn't shy away from the atrocities of the past, occasionally pointing its attention towards slavery at the time and how a character like Moses faces adversity. There's this really powerful episode early on that has our group here seeing a slave auction happening, and Moses' brother, Cato, ends up being sold. You get to really see who Moses is, the horrific stuff he had to face himself, and now dealing with seeing his brother go through that as well. And that's just the stuff early on in the show, as this all ends up playing into a larger plot point for the series. But in general, the show doesn't try to hide America's shame. It has a conversation about it. It offers you a way to learn about it, and it gives you the direct perspective of a person who went through it and is living in that time. The series starts off with one of the most important and talked about events that sparked America becoming its own country, and that of course is the Boston Tea Party. Like I was saying earlier, the show takes you through all of these different events and moments that led up to July 4th, 1776, and even then goes beyond it to the inauguration of George Washington as the first president of the United States. At this point, these kids would be young adults now, but Liberty's young adults doesn't roll off the tongue the same way. But overall, these characters feel so real in how they are written. So for being fictional characters surrounded by non-fictional characters, it's pretty interesting that they feel the most real, as they do represent the everyman from around that era from both sides of the pond. And that's not to say that all the historical figures that do show up in the series aren't, but I will say that there are plenty of historical inaccuracies here in the series, some that are really nothing more than trying to make the episode more entertaining or interesting, while while some tend to be a bit more egregious or overlook certain details so as to not paint certain figures from history in a more negative light. The fact that our main characters can represent different perspectives of the revolution at the time is a pretty good way to just have a full, wider look at what was going on. We have James being this die-hard patriot for the colonies that will seemingly not let anything get in the way of America gaining independence, while Sarah views independence as a bad idea, worried for a society living without rules and turning to chaos. But it's okay. We do have rules in America, and everything still has turned to chaos, so, you know, there's that. She also is strongly against the violence going on, not wanting to see war create such casualties for both sides. Heck, we get a moment in the series where while both of them are covering the battles of Lexington from their respective sides, we see that there's even more on the line when Sarah sees that her cousin was sent to be on the front lines and then ends up becoming a casualty of war. Thanks to the characters being written how they are, we do get to see ideologies constantly challenged, showing us that what all was going on during the revolution was a whole lot more complex and nuanced than just one side being good and one side being bad. It wasn't trying to show the politics, even though there are plenty of that in the show. It was trying to show the people, the ones who are and were affected by the decisions of those in power on each side. There isn't anything to win. You're not supposed to be persuaded into any specific perspective other than hearing how these people feel, just to put it as simply as possible. Towards the end of the series, we see how Sarah specifically grows as a person, how her perspective of everything going on starts changing as she understands the reality of what this revolution is. So,
how are you just gonna stand there and not mention that absolute banger of a theme song?
yeah, you know, that's fair. You got me there. It is a good song. I mean, it doesn't completely fit the theme of the show, but it does fit the sound of the early 2000s era.
Get my independence sign, declare it on the dotted line.
Was that a young Aaron Carter I hear? Man, rest in peace. We'll never forget how you beat Shaq. Lasting for a total of 40 episodes, Liberty's Kids ended its run in April of 2003, allowing for the series to live on as something that teachers could use in class when they wheel in the TV and don't really feel like teaching. What's this? Oh, yeah, no, okay. I would like to formally apologize to teachers for my uncalled for joke. Your job is important and not an easy one, and you all deserve more pay. Except for my 9th grade Spanish teacher. You were mean to everyone, plus you were a white dude who put on an offensive accent while teaching us in class. Oh, okay, thank you. Lamento haberte señalado públicamente. The show had the responsibility of teaching kids about the historical figures surrounding the Revolutionary War, the war itself, and the beginning of America. The show went out of its way to also include so much more in it, and like I said earlier, it having a big focus on talking about and showing slavery. These are not light topics to bring up and discuss for a kid audience watching this show, but with how it was able to bring it up, speak about it, and make sure that you could understand it is a testament to why edutainment is so important. Because sure, yes, the show's other responsibility is to be entertaining, but not at the cost of making sure these important things were talked about and done so in both a responsible and impactful way. It's really a testament to the show. I really believe it deserves its recognition for that. However, yes, there are things that were glossed over or not talked about that can feel odd, like the fact that Benjamin Franklin did own slaves. And while history can show his views on black people changing over the last 20 to 30 years of his life, the show just does not acknowledge this and only showcases him in the light of his views later on in life. In Ben Franklin's own newspaper, there were even ads listing slaves that were up for sale. Now, he's not the only one from history that the show doesn't portray exactly to who they are, it's just he's the biggest example because of him being such a main character in the series, and things hit a little different knowing the true information that's out there. His views on black people in slavery would change, and in the last decade of his life, he was an abolitionist. But with the show mixing in the years leading up to the United States officially becoming a nation and beyond it, there is a lot of history with who he was as a person left out that could have been very beneficial to be teaching in a show like this, especially with how the show has tackled the topic of slavery in the first place. We could have had the chance to see how his views changed, how he realized slavery was wrong, and how he worked towards wanting slavery to come to an end. If we can have characters that represent the feelings of both England and those in the colonies and make it a deeper conversation because things aren't just black and white, then maybe there should have been room to explore more of this here too. It's edutainment edutainment after all, and there is a lot that can be taken away from exploring and understanding all from this time, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There were a ton of historical figures that were portrayed in the show. A lot of extremely well-known ones for sure, but to the show's credit, it did put a light on other figures from this time that definitely deserved the recognition. I just think it's cool we get stories of and time with some other key players in the revolution outside of people like George Washington or the other founding fathers. Sure, they are important and will of course have a big spotlight here in the series, but the fact that we get time spent understanding that there were more people involved in Paul Revere's Midnight Ride is really cool. We get to see the important roles that they played, like Samuel Prescott being with both Paul Revere and William Dawes on their journey to Concord. No, that's not what I was referring to, and that's not even a funny joke. Who writes these scripts? All right, yes, just give it here. I'd like to apologize to myself for writing the scripts the way I do. I would say that I'll do better, but we all know that I won't change. There was also a focus on some of the women at the time that played a hand in certain events surrounding the revolution, as well as completely taking up arms and fighting. We see women like Margaret Corbin, who didn't want her husband to go into battle without her being there to aid him, and aside from providing medical care, after her husband was killed in battle, she took up his position as an artilleryman, being able to be a great help in the battle thanks to her time spent seeing her husband operate a cannon. There's also Deborah Sampson, who literally pulled a Mulan and disguised herself as a man so she could join the Continental Army, as she was able to go undetected for 17 months before being found out, and in fact, she was only found out thanks to her catching a fever and needing medical help, leading to her then being honorably discharged. Outside of the battlefield, we would see Sybil Luddington, who at just 16 years old rode a horse 40 miles through the night to the New York-Connecticut border to rally troops to fight back against British forces up in Danbury, Connecticut, leading to the Battle of Ridgefield. I think that Liberty's Kids, outside of giving us some interesting main characters to follow, did a pretty amazing job at covering all of the important events surrounding the revolution. Not only in detailing these famous events with as much accuracy as possible, but in really teaching you about the people of this time. It's not just the entertainment factor that works here, the educational side is packed with so much to learn that it truly is a good source of information that is worthy of being shown in class for the teaching side of the subject. Yeah, some things are omitted or some dialogue isn't 100% accurate to the time, and along with what I was already saying, there is a whole page dedicated to these inaccuracies that you can look at. But at the end of the day, it honestly feels like the series did the best job it could in making something like this. It honestly might be one of the best examples of edutainment that truly cares about teaching you while keeping you focused and locked into it. There's so much to explore and talk about with what Liberty's Kids offers you with knowledge, but I'll leave that up to the teachers. And that's what we call a callback, I think. Does that even count as a callback? Anyway, did you know that the show actually featured a bunch of celebrities portraying these historical figures? Just look on screen now at some of these names. That's pretty crazy for any show to get, but an educational cartoon series on PBS being able to get so many big-name people to do voices in the series is pretty wild. Liberty's Kids was a pretty great show not only for its time, but in going back and watching it now nearly 25 years later, it really is something to behold. For those in the US, I think a great way you can spend your 4th of July weekend to celebrate 250 years of the United States is by at least watching one episode of Liberty's Kids that tackles an aspect of the revolution that you're not too familiar with, so that you can learn a bit more about your own history. Or don't, it's your life. Enjoy that hot dog, champ, you've earned it. Anyway, I've been Jordan Fringe, thank you so much for watching, like and subscribe, I'll see you soon. Later.
Good night, all.